The fluorescent lights of Murphy's diner buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in that particular shade of sickly yellow that made even the healthiest complexion look jaundiced. I wiped down the same section of counter for the third time, the industrial cleaner burning my already raw knuckles as I scrubbed at a coffee stain that had probably been there since before I was hired 6 months ago. My lower back throbbed with that deep, persistent ache that came from being on my feet for 8 hours straight. The sensible white sneakers I'd bought specifically for this job squeaked against the black and white checkered linoleum every time I shifted my weight, a sound that had become the soundtrack to my new reality. Through the plate glass window, Chicago's winter rain created rivulets that distorted the neon signs across the street, turning the world into an impressionistic blur of red and blue. Sophia, Booth 7 needs water refills, and the couple at the counter wants their check. Rita's voice cut through my fog of exhaustion. She was the day shift manager, a woman in her 50s whose eyes held the kind of weariness that came from 20 years of managing a diner that barely broke even. And try to smile, honey. Tips are better when you look happy. I forced my mouth into something resembling a smile and nodded, grabbing the water pitcher with hands that trembled slightly from fatigue. 6 months ago, I'd been an executive assistant at a prestigious law firm downtown, wearing designer knockoffs and drinking overpriced lattes. 6 months ago, I'd thought Marcus Chen was the love of my life, that his promises of partnership and future meant something real. Then I'd discovered the truth. His wife, his 3 children, the house in Evanston, the complete fabrication that had been our entire relationship. The water pitcher felt heavy in my hands as I made my way to Booth 7, where an elderly couple sat discussing their grandchildren in soft, affectionate tones. The kind of love that lasted decades. The kind I'd thought I'd found, but never actually had. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket as I poured their water. I ignored it, knowing it was probably the landlord again, asking about this month's rent that was already 2 weeks overdue. The cost of starting over, of leaving that job to avoid seeing Marcus every day, of scrambling to find work that didn't require references from a firm that definitely wouldn't give them after I'd quit without notice. "Thank you, dear," the elderly woman said, her kind eyes noticing the exhaustion I couldn't quite hide. "You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself?" The simple kindness in her voice made my throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Trying to," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I get you anything else?" When they declined, I returned to the counter, checking on the couple waiting for their check. The man was scrolling through his phone while his companion watched the rain, and something about their comfortable silence made my chest ache with loneliness. I processed their payment, forcing another smile as I thanked them for coming, then retreated to the kitchen under the guise of checking on orders. The back area smelled of grease and industrial soap, the huge industrial dishwasher rumbling like distant thunder. Carlos, the line cook, gave me a sympathetic look as he flipped burgers on the griddle. "Rough day, Sophia?" "Rough 6 months," I corrected, pulling my phone from my pocket to check the message. It wasn't the landlord. It was worse. "Marcus. I heard you're working at some diner now. That's really sad. I thought you had more ambition than that. We could have had something real if you'd just been more understanding about my situation. The audacity. The sheer breathtaking audacity of this man who had lied to me for 18 months, who had introduced me to his business partner, who turned out to be his wife, who had made me the other woman without my knowledge or consent. And now he had the nerve to criticize my response to discovering his betrayal? My hands shook as I stared at the message, rage burning through the exhaustion. Before I could think better of it, I opened a new text and began typing furiously, my thumbs flying across the screen. "You want to know what's really sad, Marcus? That you're so pathetic you have to reach out to your ex to feel superior. I'm working an honest job, which is more than you can say. And you know what? I deserve better than a lying coward who can't commit to anything except his own ego. I deserve a man who isn't afraid of the truth. A man with actual integrity. A man who knows how to treat a woman like she matters. But that was never you, was it? You're just a scared little boy playing dress-up in a suit. I hit send before I could reconsider, the satisfying swoosh of the message leaving my phone providing a moment of cathartic release. There. Let him chew on that. Let him feel a fraction of the humiliation and pain he'd caused me. "Order up, Sophia," Rita called from the kitchen window. "Table 3, 2 specials and a side of fries." I pocketed my phone and grabbed the plates, the familiar weight and heat grounding me back in the present. The lunch rush was starting to pick up, the diner filling with the usual mix of construction workers, office employees, and locals who'd been coming to Murphy's for decades. The din of conversation, clinking silverware, and the oldies station Rita always had playing created a cocoon of noise that was almost comforting in its predictability. Table 3 was occupied by a group of businessmen, their expensive suits and confident laughter a stark reminder of the world I'd left behind. I delivered their food with practiced efficiency, refilled their coffees, and retreated before they could make the kind of comments that men in suits sometimes made to waitresses they assumed were beneath them. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it, focusing instead on clearing table 5, wiping down surfaces, taking orders from a family that had just seated themselves in booth 2. But the buzz came again, and again. And then it started ringing. During a brief lull, I ducked back into the kitchen area and checked my phone, expecting more vitriol from Marcus. Instead, I saw multiple messages from an unknown number with a Chicago area code. Unknown. I think you have me confused with someone else. Unknown. But I have to say, that's quite a message to receive unexpectedly. Unknown. For what it's worth, you're absolutely right. You deserve all of those things. Unknown. And I'm intrigued to know who failed you so badly that you felt the need to say so. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. In my fury, I must have somehow sent that message to the wrong contact. But to whom? I scrolled through my recent messages frantically, trying to figure out what had happened. My fingers had been flying. I'd been angry. I must have clicked on the wrong conversation thread. Before I could formulate a response or even process my mortification, another message appeared. Unknown. My name is Sebastian. And despite the unconventional introduction, I'd very much like to take you to dinner and prove that not all men are cowards. I stared at the screen, my face burning with embarrassment. This was a nightmare. I'd just poured my heart out to a complete stranger, ranting about my failed relationship and my worth, as if this random person had any obligation to care. I quickly typed back, "I'm so sorry. That message wasn't meant for you. Please just delete it and forget this happened." The response came almost immediately. Why would I delete it? It's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years, and I meant what I said. Dinner, tomorrow night. Was this person insane? Who responded to a misdirected angry text by asking the sender on a date? Me. That's very kind, but I don't even know you. And I'm definitely not in a place to be dating anyone right now. Sebastian. Then we won't call it a date. Call it an apology dinner from me for whatever this Marcus person did to make you feel that way. No expectations. Just good food and perhaps better conversation than you're used to. There was something oddly compelling about his messages. The confidence without arrogance. The interest without pressure. Or maybe I was just so starved for human connection that any crumb of kindness felt like a feast. Me. How do you even know my name is real? How do I know yours is? This could be some kind of scam. Sebastian. Your name is Sophia Bennett. You're 28 years old. You worked at Henderson & Associates until 6 months ago when you quit suddenly. You're currently employed at Murphy's Diner on West Madison. You live in a studio apartment in Rogers Park that you can barely afford. And you're not a scammer because scammers don't accidentally send emotional messages to random numbers. They're far more calculated. Ice flooded my veins. This stranger knew my full name, my age, my employment history, my address. How was any of this possible? My hands began to shake as I typed my response. Me. How do you know those things? Have you been following me? I'm calling the police. Sebastian, please don't be alarmed. I have resources that allow me to find information quickly. I wanted to know who I was speaking with before continuing this conversation. I assure you, my intentions are not sinister. Quite the opposite, in fact. I'm simply a man who values directness, and your message, despite being misdirected, showed me someone who speaks her truth even when she's angry. That's rare and valuable. Me. That's not reassuring. That's terrifying. Normal people don't investigate strangers who accidentally text them. They just ignore it or say wrong number and move on with their lives. Sebastian. I'm not normal people, Sophia. But I am someone who knows what it's like to be surrounded by liars and cowards. Your words struck a chord. So, I'm offering you a meal, a conversation, and perhaps a chance to see that not everyone will disappoint you. That's all. My rational mind was screaming at me to block this number immediately. Any person who could access that much information, that quickly was either law enforcement, which had its own concerning implications, or someone with resources and connections that suggested he operated in worlds I wanted nothing to do with. But another part of me, the part that had been lonely and hurt and exhausted for 6 straight months, was curious. Sophia! Rita's voice jolted me back to reality. Break's over. We've got a party of 8 coming in, and I need you on the floor. I shoved my phone back into my apron pocket, my mind still reeling from the bizarre conversation. Throughout the rest of my shift, which stretched until 6 o'clock when the dinner rush finally subsided, I felt the weight of my phone like a lead brick against my hip. Sebastian didn't message again, as if he understood that I needed time to process. By the time I clocked out, my feet ached so badly I wanted to cry, and the Chicago winter rain had intensified into a proper downpour. I stood under the diner's small awning, watching water sheet off the edges, gathering my courage to make a run for the bus stop 3 blocks away. Rough shift? Carlos asked, appearing beside me with his own coat pulled tight. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, I lied, forcing a smile. 6 hours of Saturday lunch rush will do that. He nodded sympathetically. Need a ride? My car's just around the corner. I'm good, but thanks. The last thing I needed was to complicate my work life with personal entanglements, however innocent. I'd learned that lesson with Marcus. I made my run for the bus, arriving soaked and shivering at the stop, just as the 36 pulled up. The ride back to my apartment was a blur of wet windows and the humid warmth of too many bodies pressed together, the smell of damp clothes and cheap cologne mixing into something almost nauseating. My studio apartment was exactly as I'd left it that morning, small, cold, and depressing. I'd tried to make it homey with second-hand furniture and discount store decorations, but it remained stubbornly cheerless. The single window looked out on an alley, and the radiator clanked with such violence I sometimes worried it might explode. After a hot shower that used up most of the building's hot water, I wrapped myself in my threadbare robe and finally allowed myself to look at my phone again. No new messages from Sebastian. Part of me felt relief. Part of me felt disappointment. I opened our message thread and reread his words. I'm simply a man who values directness, and your message, despite being misdirected, showed me someone who speaks her truth even when she's angry. Against my better judgment, I typed, 1 dinner, public place, and I want to know your last name and what you actually do before I agree to anything. The response came within seconds. Moretti, Sebastian Moretti. And as for what I do, I'd prefer to discuss that in person. I'll send a car for you tomorrow at 7. Dress comfortably. And Sophia? Thank you for giving me this chance. I stared at the message for a long moment, then did what I should have done hours ago. I Googled Sebastian Moretti Chicago. The results made my blood run cold, I spent most of Sunday morning questioning my sanity. The Google search results from the night before had painted a picture that should have sent me running in the opposite direction. Sebastian Moretti wasn't just wealthy, he was dangerous. Articles from the Chicago Tribune and Sun-Times mentioned his name in connection with alleged organized crime activities, though nothing had ever stuck. There were photos of him at charity galas, always in impeccably tailored suits, always with the same unreadable expression. Dark hair, strong jawline, eyes that seemed to assess everything around him with calculating precision. He was, objectively, one of the most handsome men I'd ever seen. He was also, according to every credible news source, someone I should avoid at all costs. Yet here I was, standing in front of my pathetic excuse for a closet, trying to figure out what one wore to dinner with a possible mob boss. "Dress comfortably," he'd said, which was either genuine or some kind of test. Everything I owned was either too formal from my previous life or too casual for anywhere that wasn't Murphy's Diner. I finally settled on dark jeans that still fit well, a cream-colored sweater that had been expensive once upon a time, and my only pair of boots that didn't look completely worn out. Simple gold hoops that had been my grandmother's, minimal makeup. If this was a mistake, and it almost certainly was, I at least wanted to look like myself when I made it. My phone buzzed at exactly 6:30. A text from Sebastian. "The car will arrive at 7. The driver's name is James. He knows where we're going." The implication was clear. I didn't need to know. I should just trust and follow. Every self-preservation instinct I possessed screamed at me to cancel, to block his number, to pretend this bizarre situation had never happened. Instead, I found myself texting back, "See you soon." At precisely 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. James. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett. I'm downstairs whenever you're ready." I grabbed my purse, a designer bag from my old life that I'd never been able to bring myself to sell, and made my way down the 3 flights of stairs, my heart pounding harder with each step. What was I doing? This was insane. I was going to dinner with a man who was likely a criminal, all because I'd accidentally sent him an angry text meant for my lying ex-boyfriend. The car waiting outside made my ancient building look even shabbier by comparison. A sleek black Mercedes, pristine despite the dirty Chicago streets, idling at the curb like a panther at rest. A man in a dark suit, James presumably, stood beside the rear door, holding an umbrella despite the fact that the rain had stopped hours ago. "Ms. Bennett," he said with a respectful nod, his face professionally neutral. "Mr. Moretti is looking forward to meeting you." He opened the door before I could respond, and I found myself sliding into leather seats that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. The interior smelled of expensive cologne and new car, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. James closed my door with a gentle click and moved around to the driver's seat. "It's about a 20-minute drive," he said, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Moretti asked me to ensure you were comfortable. There's water in the console if you'd like." "Where are we going?" I asked, proud that my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Bella Notte. It's a restaurant in River North. Mr. Moretti has a private table there." Of course he did. Bella Notte was the kind of place that had a months-long waiting list and prices that required a second mortgage. I'd walked past it once with Marcus, who'd laughed when I suggested we try to get a reservation, saying it was too pretentious for his taste. Now I wondered if he'd simply never been able to afford it. The drive through Chicago on a Sunday evening was almost peaceful. The city lights reflected off the still wet streets, and James navigated with the kind of practiced ease that suggested he'd made this journey many times before. I found myself wondering how many other women had sat in this exact seat, being driven to meet Sebastian Moretti. How many had been foolish enough to accept dinner invitations from strangers who could access their entire life history with a few phone calls? "May I ask you something, James?" I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Of course, Ms. Bennett." "How long have you worked for Mr. Moretti?" 15 years, he replied, his tone warming slightly. Since I was 23. Is he? I hesitated, unsure how to phrase the question. Is he a good employer? James's eyes met mine in the mirror again, and something like amusement flickered there. Mr. Moretti is many things, Miss Bennet. But yes, he's fair to those who are loyal to him. He values honesty above all else. The implication hung in the air. Be honest, and you'll be fine. Lie, and face consequences I probably didn't want to imagine. Bellinota occupied the ground floor of a renovated warehouse in River North, all exposed brick and soft lighting visible through its large windows. James pulled up to the front entrance, where another man in a suit was already waiting. He opened my door before James could exit the vehicle. Ms. Bennet, the new man said, with the same professional courtesy. I'm Marco. Mr. Moretti is waiting for you inside. Please, follow me. The interior of Bellinota was even more impressive than the exterior suggested. Warm lighting from Edison bulbs cast a golden glow over white tablecloths and dark wood. The space managed to feel intimate despite its size, with strategic placement of plants and decorative screens creating private alcoves. The scent of fresh bread and herbs made my stomach growl, reminding me that I'd been too nervous to eat much today. But it wasn't the decor that made me stop breathing. It was the man rising from a corner table in the most private section of the restaurant, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. Sebastian Moretti in person was devastating. The photos hadn't done him justice. He stood at least 6 feet tall, his navy suit tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a trim waist. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, all strong angles and classical proportions. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Dark, intelligent, and currently focused on me with what looked like genuine pleasure. Sophia, he said, and the way my name sounded in his deep voice made something low in my belly tighten. Thank you for coming. I wasn't certain you would. He moved around the table to greet me properly, and I was hit with the scent of his cologne, something woody and expensive with notes of bergamot. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His grip was warm and firm, his palm slightly calloused in a way that surprised me. These weren't the soft hands of someone who only pushed papers. I almost didn't, I admitted, deciding that James's advice about honesty was probably sound. The Google search was enlightening. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I imagine it was. Please sit. We can discuss what Google says about me if you'd like, though I should warn you that most of it is wildly exaggerated. Marco pulled out my chair with practiced grace, and I sat, hyper-aware of Sebastian's proximity as he returned to his own seat across from me. The table was small enough to feel intimate, but large enough to maintain proper distance. A single white rose in a crystal vase sat between us, and 2 glasses of water had already been poured. Wine? Sebastian asked, gesturing to a bottle I didn't recognize but that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. Or would you prefer something else? Water is fine, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. I don't usually drink much. He nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. Neither do I, actually. I like to keep a clear head. He leaned back slightly, studying me with those dark eyes. You look lovely, by the way, though you also look like you're planning your escape route. The observation was so accurate that I laughed despite my nerves. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention, he replied. And I'm very attentive when something interests me. He paused, letting that sink in. So let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? You've Googled me. You know what people say. What would you like to know that Google couldn't tell you? I took a sip of water, buying time to organize my thoughts. Are the things they say true? About your business? Some of them, he said with refreshing directness. I have interests that extend beyond what most would consider legitimate, but I also run several completely legal enterprises. Import, export, real estate, restaurants, including this one. He gestured around us. The truth, Sophia, is that I exist in shades of gray that most people prefer to pretend don't exist. I provide services that are in demand, and I ensure that those under my protection remain safe. Is that criminal? By some definitions, yes. Do I lose sleep over it? No. The honesty was jarring. I'd expected evasion, perhaps outright lies. Instead, he was laying out exactly who and what he was, giving me the information I needed to make an informed choice about whether to stay or leave. Why did you ask me here? I asked. Really? You can't tell me it's just because I accidentally sent you an angry text. A waiter appeared before he could answer, presenting us with leather-bound menus. Sebastian ordered for both of us without asking my preference, which should have annoyed me but somehow didn't. He seemed to sense what I needed before I did, starting with a simple antipasto plate and moving on to pasta dishes that sounded like poetry when he described them in Italian to the clearly delighted waiter. When we were alone again, Sebastian leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. You want to know why you're here? Because your message reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten, that there are still people in this world who believe in truth, even when it hurts, who expect integrity and are angry when they don't receive it. His voice dropped lower. You've been hurt by a coward, Sophia, someone who didn't deserve you, and I find myself wanting to show you that not all men are like Marcus Chen. The fact that he knew Marcus's full name shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Have you investigated him too? Thoroughly, Sebastian admitted without shame. Married man, 3 children, leads a double life. Uses women like they're disposable. He's a particular kind of predator, and I have very little patience for men who lie to women. Something dark flickered in his eyes. He won't be bothering you again, by the way. Ice slid down my spine. What did you do? Nothing permanent, Sebastian assured me, though his smile suggested that nothing permanent still covered a significant range of possibilities. Simply made it clear that you're under my protection now, and any further contact with you would be unwise. I never asked for your protection, I said, though the words lacked heat. The truth was, knowing that Marcus wouldn't be sending me any more condescending texts was a relief I hadn't expected. No, you didn't, Sebastian agreed, but I'm offering it anyway, along with this dinner, this conversation, and if you'll allow it, the opportunity to show you what it's like to be treated with the respect you deserve. The antipasto arrived, and for several minutes we ate in comfortable silence. The food was extraordinary. Fresh mozzarella, prosciutto so thin it was nearly translucent, olives marinated in herbs I couldn't identify. I found myself relaxing despite my better judgment, the combination of good food and Sebastian's unexpectedly easy company lowering my defenses. Tell me about yourself, Sebastian said, refilling my water glass. Not the things I already know from my research. Tell me something true, something that matters to you. I considered the question, twirling my fork through a piece of mozzarella. I used to think I was a good judge of character, I said finally. I prided myself on it, actually. And then Marcus happened, and I realized I'd spent 18 months completely blind to who he really was. It made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Sebastian nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. We all have blind spots when it comes to people we care about. That's not a flaw in your judgment. It's evidence that you're capable of trust. Marcus exploited that. But the fact that you can still admit to being hurt, that you can still feel angry about being deceived, tells me your capacity for trust isn't broken, just bruised. The insight was uncomfortably accurate. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am, he said simply. I learned very young that trust is a currency, and most people will spend it carelessly. So I became someone who trusts very few people. But when I do, that trust is absolute. His eyes held mine. "I'm wondering if you might be someone worth trusting, Sophia." "You don't even know me," I protested, though my heart was beating faster. "I know that you quit a good job rather than continue working with someone who betrayed you. I know that you took a position at a diner, serving food to people who probably don't appreciate the sacrifice that represents. I know that you'd rather struggle than compromise your principles." He paused. "I know that when you're angry, you speak your truth without filters. And I know that you're here, despite every instinct telling you to run, because you're curious about what this could be." He was right. God help me. He was absolutely right. I was curious. More than curious. I was drawn to this dangerous man in ways I couldn't fully explain. Maybe it was the honesty after months of lies. Maybe it was the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room, despite the restaurant being full of other diners. Or maybe I was just lonely and foolish, repeating the same mistakes in a different form. The pasta courses arrived, and Sebastian's choices proved perfect. We ate and talked, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. He asked about my family, deceased parents, no siblings, a grandmother who'd raised me and died 2 years ago. I asked about his, a complicated answer involving a father he'd disappointed by going into the family business, a mother who pretended not to know what her husband and son actually did, 2 sisters who'd married well and moved away. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "The path you chose?" Sebastian considered this, taking a sip of his wine. "I regret that it limits my options in some ways. I'll never run for public office or appear on the cover of Forbes as a legitimate businessman. But I don't regret the power it's given me, or the ability to protect the people I care about." His gaze intensified, and I'm discovering tonight that perhaps it's also given me the resources to offer things to people who deserve better than what they've been given. "You're talking about me," I said, not quite a question. "I'm talking about you," he confirmed. "You're working yourself into exhaustion at a diner, living in an apartment that isn't safe, struggling to make ends meet because a man lied to you, and you chose integrity over comfort. That shouldn't be your reality, Sophia. It doesn't have to be." Warning bells rang in my head. "What exactly are you offering?" "Nothing you're not willing to give," Sebastian said carefully. "But I'm a man who sees potential, and I see it in you. That position at Henderson and Associates, you were good at it, weren't you? Organizing, managing, handling details." "I was excellent at it," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Marcus wasn't the only reason I left. The partners were grooming me for promotion, but when I quit to get away from him, they made it clear I'd burned that bridge. Sebastian's expression darkened. "They should have protected you, not punished you for being a victim." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need someone with your skills. My legitimate businesses require extensive management, scheduling, organization, dealing with vendors and clients. It's work you're more than qualified for, and it pays significantly better than serving coffee at Murphy's." I stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. "You're offering me a job? After one dinner?" "I'm offering you an opportunity," he corrected. "One that would use your actual talents instead of wasting them. You'd work from an office in one of my properties downtown. Regular hours, full benefits, salary that would allow you to live somewhere safer." He paused. "And before you ask, no strings attached. This isn't a proposition disguised as employment. I'm offering this because you're capable, and because I have a use for capability." It was too much, too generous, too convenient. "Why do I feel like there's a catch?" "Because you're intelligent enough to know that nothing in life is free," Sebastian said with a slight smile. "The catch, if you want to call it that, is that you'd be working for me, which means you'd be in my world, at least peripherally. You'd see things, know things. Once you're in, it's not easy to walk away." "You mean I'd be trapped?" I said flatly. "I mean you'd be protected," he countered. There's a difference. But yes, association with me comes with risks as well as benefits. I won't lie to you about that, Sophia. I've never lied to you, and I don't plan to start. The waiter returned to clear our plates, and Sebastian ordered tiramisu for us to share, along with espresso. When we were alone again, I found my voice. I need time to think about this. Of course, Sebastian said easily. Take whatever time you need. The offer stands. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. It was simple, elegant, just his name, a phone number, and an address downtown. Call me when you've decided. Or if you need anything in the meantime. Anything at all. I took the card, its weight somehow heavier than mere cardstock. This is crazy, I said softly. This whole night, the job offer, all of it. Perhaps, Sebastian agreed. Or perhaps it's exactly what you need, whether you realize it yet or not. He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made my pulse quicken. I'm not Marcus, Sophia. I won't lie to you. I won't make promises I can't keep. What I will do is exactly what I say I'll do. Treat you with respect, pay you fairly, and ensure you're safe. The rest is up to you. The tiramisu arrived, and as we shared the dessert, I found myself studying this enigmatic man across from me. Dangerous, yes. Possibly criminal, definitely. But also honest in ways Marcus never had been. Direct where Marcus had been evasive. Offering me agency where Marcus had stolen it. By the time James drove me home, my head was spinning with possibilities and concerns in equal measure. Sebastian walked me to the car himself, his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. Thank you for tonight, he said as James held the door open. I hope I'll hear from you soon. You will, I found myself saying. I just need to think. Think carefully, he advised, his dark eyes holding mine. But while you're thinking, know this. I meant every word I said tonight. You deserve better than what you've had, Sophia, and I'd very much like to be the one who gives it to you. The ride home was silent, my mind too full for conversation. When James dropped me off outside my building, he handed me another card. Mr. Moretti wanted you to have this as well. It's my direct number. Day or night, if you need anything, you call. Those are my instructions. Thank you, James, I managed, taking the card. He's not who people think he is, James said quietly, meeting my eyes. He's better, and worse, but he's honest about both. I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, my body exhausted but my mind racing. The evening had been nothing like what I expected. Sebastian was nothing like what I expected, and the job offer was so tempting it scared me. I changed into my threadbare pajamas and crawled into bed, Sebastian's business card on my nightstand like a promise and a threat. My phone buzzed with a text. Sebastian, sleep well, Sophia. And remember, you're already stronger than you think. Trust yourself. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you for dinner. And for being honest. His reply came immediately. Always. That's my promise to you. As I finally drifted toward sleep, I realized that somehow, without quite meaning to, I'd already made my decision. I just needed a few more days to admit it to myself. Monday morning at Murphy's Diner felt different. The same fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The same coffee machine hissed and sputtered. The same regulars occupied their usual booths. But I moved through my shift like I was watching myself from a distance, my mind replaying every moment of the previous night. The weight of Sebastian's business card in my pocket was a constant reminder that my life could change with a single phone call. You seem distracted today, Rita observed during the mid-morning lull, her sharp eyes missing nothing as I refilled the sugar dispensers for the 3rd time. Everything okay? Just tired, I lied. forcing a smile. Didn't sleep well. She studied me for a moment longer, then patted my shoulder. Well, try to focus. We've got the lunch rush coming, and I need you sharp. The lunch rush came and went in its usual blur of orders and complaints and the occasional decent tip. I served businessmen their burgers, families their pancakes, and elderly couples their soup and sandwiches, all while Sebastian's words echoed in my mind. You're working yourself into exhaustion at a diner, living in an apartment that isn't safe, struggling to make ends meet because a man lied to you. He wasn't wrong. None of it was wrong. I was exhausted, struggling, barely surviving. And for what? Pride? Some misguided sense that accepting help was weakness? During my afternoon break, I pulled out Sebastian's card and stared at the embossed lettering. Just a phone number and an address. Nothing threatening, nothing sinister. Just an opportunity if I was brave enough to take it. My phone rang, an unknown number. My heart jumped before I answered. Hello? Sophia Bennett? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yes? This is Jennifer Walsh from Henderson & Associates. I'm calling to follow up on some paperwork from your departure. Do you have a moment? My old firm. I hadn't heard from them in 6 months, and now suddenly they were calling? I suppose, I said carefully. We've had a request from Sebastian Moretti's office for employment verification. As part of our standard process, I wanted to confirm you'd authorize this inquiry. So he was serious. He was actually checking my references, preparing to hire me. The realization made my pulse quicken. Yes, I heard myself say. I authorized it. Excellent. And may I say, Sophia, we were sorry to lose you. You were an exemplary employee, if circumstances had been different. She trailed off delicately. If your partner hadn't been sleeping with me while lying about his wife. You mean? The words came out sharper than I intended. An uncomfortable pause. Yes. Well, in any case, I'll be providing Mr. Moretti's office with a glowing reference. You deserved better from us, Sophia. I hope this new opportunity works out. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Henderson & Associates was giving me a good reference. Sebastian had made that happen somehow, and he'd done it before I'd even agreed to take the job, as if my acceptance was inevitable. The presumption should have angered me. Instead, I felt something uncomfortably close to gratitude. That evening, as I walked to the bus stop in the fading November light, my phone buzzed with a text. Not from Sebastian, from Marcus. Marcus, I don't know what you did or who you know, but you need to call off your attack dog. This is harassment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I should ask what he meant. I should demand details. Instead, I found myself texting Sebastian. Me. What did you do to Marcus? The reply came within seconds. Sebastian. Nothing he didn't deserve. He won't contact you again. You have my word. Me. That's not an answer. Sebastian. Would you prefer the details, or would you prefer to simply trust that the problem has been handled? I stared at the exchange, recognizing the test implicit in his question. Did I want to know the darkness behind his protection, or was I willing to accept the results without examining the methods? Me. I'm not sure I should trust you. Sebastian. Probably not, but you do anyway. That's why you're still thinking about my offer instead of blocking my number. He was right. Again. God, why was he always right? Me. You're very sure of yourself. Sebastian. I'm sure of what I see. And I see a woman who's tired of being afraid, tired of struggling, tired of being punished for someone else's sins. I see someone ready for a change, even if that change scares her. Am I wrong? My fingers trembled as I typed my response. Me. When can I start? The bus arrived before he could reply, and I spent the entire ride home with my heart